we've just finished season 28 of Battlegrounds, and this is the long-awaited season where we finally did get that updated rewards package from Kabam. So we have now a new currency called Radiance, and obviously a store where we can spend that Radiance. All the juiciest items in the game, they're available there. Given the prices of those items as well as the amount of Radiance that we get, it's really across the board a huge bump in the amount that we're going to be receiving for placing in the gladiator circuit, especially for the people at the top. Really, but it's really a very good bump for everybody in GC. So it was really a very active and competitive season because of that. What I want to do with this video is briefly summarize the results of this season, and then do some analysis of just how active and competitive this season was, and maybe talk a little bit about how that might affect the future of this game mode. So I do have up here the top 30 results for Gladiator Circuit ranks in Season 28. And we saw that Barrowman, yet again, was able to claim that #1 spot, and really by a decent margin. So I don't know exactly how many wins he has at this point, but it's quite a few. So he's been dominant. Congrats to him for continuing that dominance over this game mode. Stonehenge, Biwi, numbers 2 and 3, congrats to them. Both very familiar names to those who follow activity in the Gladiator circuit. Stonehenge, in the time that I've been tracking, he hasn't finished this high before, so congrats to him. He may have gotten there before I started tracking. Same thing with Biwi. He's been in top 10 before, but never as high as 3 in the time that I've been tracking. So, yeah, podium results, if they are new for Stonehenge and Biwi, congrats to them, and congrats to the rest of the top 30. I've done a previous video on my attempt to statistically analyze multiple seasons worth of rank data, season end rank data, and say, well, who are the best overall Battlegrounds players? I'll give the same disclaimer in this update as I did in my previous video, which is, obviously this is similar in concept to what MP does in his top 30 Battlegrounds players videos. This is not any attempt to kind of compete with that, supersede it. It's a companion piece. His view is obviously a lot more reliable because it's based on a combination of the results as well as his own, and I guess not just his own, he and his fellow competitors, I guess their collective view on who are the most dangerous, the most talented people that they face at the top of Gladiator circuit. And so this is really just looking at the numbers. So, the only advantage here is that it's, taking subjectivity completely out of it. Just what do the numbers tell us? So maybe a better title for this is, or a better name for this is, who are the most accomplished Battlegrounds players rather than who are the best. In any case, with all that kind of disclaimer out of the way, no surprise, Barrowman is still the #1. He's solidified his hold on that #1 spot. You can see just in the past 8 seasons, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 #1 spots, and then he's got a #2, a #3, a #4. So not just very strong results, but strong and consistent results. So like I said, he's dominant in this game mode. He's clearly the best overall. Liam, Trap, Andrew, it's a little bit bittersweet seeing those names at the top here because, as many of you know, these guys are either retired or retiring. So Liam did announce his retirement. I think he retired actually 2 weeks before the season ended, and he still managed to finish 23rd, which is pretty amazing. Trap did announce his retirement, so right after he managed to get that #1 spot, he took it easy this season, and he's leaving the game entirely. So, fortunately, we will see those two greats no longer. Andrew still is playing, and you can see that he still finished top 10, but he's no longer pushing for that #1 spot. So, he might be able to maintain his, his spot in the top 10 of these rankings that I do, but Liam and Trap eventually will fall out, which then creates an opportunity for people to come in and take their spots in the top 10. I do want to briefly mention Biwi was previously just outside of the top 10, so no surprise that he comes in, especially with that strong result in season 28, to now be #9. And then who's knocking at the door? Speak of the devil. You have MP here, you have Stonehenge here, and then Paolo, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Siouna. It used to be called Apple, I believe, but yeah, all these people are, and Canvell, all these people are very well positioned to be able to, with strong results, break into that top 10. So we'll see who's able to do that. Um, so moving on to just some analysis of, again, how active and competitive this season was. So first thing to look at is just how many people did make it to the Gladiator circuit. I do have up here, these are basically by this date, there were this many people in the Gladiator circuit. So by season end, it's quite a whopping number. Almost 112,000 people did make it into the Gladiator circuit. And what's pretty impressive is not just, I guess, that huge overall number, but just how quickly people got into the Gladiator circuit. So you can see that I broke the first day down into just the first few hours. And so by the end of hour 3 of Battlegrounds Season 28 being launched, you already had 3,000 people in the Gladiator circuit, which is a little bit crazy. So even by the end of the first week, obviously you had all the people who were shooting for that 10,000 radiance reward for getting to the Gladiator circuit in the first week, but 60,000 plus people, it's pretty stunning. Obviously I do have to mention that there was an error on Kabam's part when they set up this season. People got seated way too high, far higher than they would have in any ordinary season. So that did make it a lot easier for people to make it to the Gladiator circuit. One, for people who had finished well in previous seasons, they had a very short road to climb to get into that Gladiator circuit. And because all these people were exiting Gladiator circuit very quickly, it's also, the people who didn't benefit from that seeding bug because they weren't playing at all or didn't advance very far in the previous season, it was a lot easier for them to quickly climb the ranks, right? All these big guns were no longer in the mix. So coming back to this 112K number, how does that compare to other seasons? I don't have that data myself. I've only been tracking in previous seasons. I've only been preserving the top 10,000 finishers in each season, so I can't say myself what the total number of GC finishers were. But I did some searching and found a fairly reliable source. Just switching to it briefly here. So this forum post was made back in November by DNA 3000. Anybody who spent any time on the forums knows that DNA 3000 does do a lot of high quality posts and analysis. And so this was on the heels of, I believe it was called Jack's Battle Realm Blitz event. This was a realm event. So that event had very juicy rewards. And he was now analyzing, I guess, much as I am, well, just how much did that rewards bump end up juicing activity. And so for that season, there were 98,000, a little bit over 98,000 people who finished in the Gladiator circuit. We're well ahead of that. And he does mention here that he has access to the data of who was making it to Gladiator circuits in all these seasons, and it's typically between 30K and 40K, closer to that 30K number, according to him. So I can't independently verify those results again, but DNA 3000, he's very reliable as far as his post here. So I'll take it at face value. So, if you have average 30 to 40K, you have this one outlier season in recent memory that because it had a special event, it was close to 100K. And then you have, what actually happened this season blew that away, 112K. So very impressive. Will again mention that caveat that yes, it was very easy to make the Gladiator circuit, or much easier than it normally would be. But I think that still is a great indicator of the health of this game mode, or at least the newfound health of this game mode with the attention that Kabam has given to it, starting with that big rewards bump. So a different look at just how active this season was. I brought up all the different brackets in Gladiator circuit, except for Uru 6, because I'm going to be talking about cutoffs, and there's no cutoff for Uru 6. It's basically anybody who finished below the cutoff for Uru 5 was lumped into Uru 6. And so, since Uru 5 is basically everybody up to rank 48,500, and we know that 112,000 people made it into Gladiator circuit, you're talking about 60,000 plus people who were in Uru 6. But as far as the ranks above that, so we have the cutoffs, as well as my attempt to here characterize the distance between each bracket in terms of the number of wins needed to go from the bottom of one bracket into the bottom of the next bracket. This is assuming that you get 16 points per win, which is roughly, it's not always true, but and then once you get towards the top, it stops being as true. But for most of the Gladiator circuit, that's true. And so you can see just how tightly bunched together, even though there are thousands of people in each of these brackets, you're typically talking about somewhere between 1 and 2 wins gets you from, say for Uru 3, it's almost exactly 1 win would get you from rank 30,500 to rank 24,000. So you're climbing almost 6,000, actually more than 6,000 spots just with that 1 win, which is just almost bordering on absurd. And that trend continues. There was some competitiveness here around the Uru 1 and Gamma 4 break, right? It jumps up to 1.6 wins and needed to advance to the next level, but then it drops down again, even gets below 1. Gamma 2 to Gamma 1, it's like half a win. Actually, between Gamma 3 and Gamma 1, just a single win would jump you up 2 entire brackets. In any case, this roughly 1 to 1.5 wins trend continues up until you get to that Quantum 1 Mysterium 3 break, right? And so, as everybody knows who was fighting for one of these spots, or if you saw one of my previous videos, there's a huge rewards jump from Quantum 1 to Mysterium 3. So it's no surprise that that's where there was a huge jump in the competitiveness level. So once you got into Quantum 1, 360 points, you needed another 4+ wins to get to that next tier in Mysterium 3. And then it kind of levels off a bit. Actually, Mysterium 3 itself was very thin, so you could be bottom of Mysterium 3 and 1 win catapults you into mid Mysterium 2. But then it gets a lot competitive, much more competitive again, because there is another big jump from Mysterium 1 to Celestial 6. So you need 6 wins to get from 450 rank to 250 rank. So really quite a spread there. That continues through the rest of Celestial circuit, and the Celestial part of the circuit, and no real surprise there. One of the key questions I had coming into this Battlegrounds season was just how much would the renewed interest in Battlegrounds result in people who had the potential to compete at the various highest levels of Gladiator circuit, right? You have that combination of, the talent, the roster, and the time needed to actually compete at this level. To what degree would these new entrants to the arena crowd out some of the existing people who had been reliably competing up to this point? So said another way, if you had been reliably finishing C5 in the past, to what extent would these new people coming into the game mode crowd you out of Celestial 5? So the way I decided to analyze that was to say, of the people finishing these ranks or better in Season 28, look at that population and say, what was their best prior finish in the previous 3 seasons? 3 seasons, I felt like that was enough to say, if you weren't active in any one of those 3 seasons, then can't really call you someone who's actively pushing Battlegrounds. So in those 3 seasons, had you cracked top 100 before, top 250 before, top 1,000 before, etc. So rather than go through every single result in this matrix, just some of the top level takeaways. So Celestial 5, reminder that Celestial 5 means top 100 or better. So looking at the people who finished C5 this season who hadn't recently finished top 250, right? Hadn't finished even once top 250 in any one of the previous 3 seasons. And that's 10 out of the 100. So exactly 10% of the C5 pool this season was previously not really pushing Battlegrounds, which is probably... I don't know if I had a specific number in mind when I was asking myself this question at the start of the season, but I'm not too surprised at that result. Looking a little bit further at Celestial 6, so now this is by this season's definition. Previously it was top 200, now it's top 250. But looking at these top 250 players, who of those top 250 had not had a recent top 1,000 finish? Since we're looking at an expanded group, I have to expand the range that I'm going to look to say, were you previously competitive or not? And now that number jumps pretty significantly. So of the top 250 players this season, 39 of them had not previously had a top 1,000 finish. So that's 16% of the pool. And then finally, Mysterium players. So that's now top 1,000. It was previously top 800, but now top 1,000 players this season who hadn't had a recent top 1,500 finish, and that's 25% of the pool. 251 to be exact of those 1,000 hadn't previously been pushing Battlegrounds. So that's interesting. 25%. That's pretty significant. But again, keep in mind that the sizes of these brackets has changed. C5 didn't change, but C6 added 50 spots, and Mysterium 3 added 200 spots. Right, the Mysterium 3 or better was previously top 800, and now it's top 1,000. So it's kind of curious that C6 actually added more spots than new competitors came in, right? So if you were C6 reliably before, chances are you're still able to get that C6 even with the new people coming in. Mysterium 3 also, you can quibble with, I guess, 1,500 is that the right range to look at, but it's still roughly the number of new entrants is made up for by the expanded size of the pool. So that fear I had, I guess, is allayed somewhat that, I'm not going to be crowded out by these new players because the sizes of the reward brackets has been expanded. Some of you may remember that in his dev diary post that Kabam Crash made before the start of this season, he went into some detail explaining why he made the decisions that he did, or why Kabam collectively made the decisions that they did not to prioritize Battlegrounds. And they included the language that, well, Battlegrounds is ultimately a niche game mode. And that came as a surprise to a lot of us, right? That, a lot of people in the community feel that all of the YouTube content creation is about Battlegrounds. A lot of forum posts, whether it's on the official forums, on Reddit, whatever, concern Battlegrounds. So isn't this the premier game mode? And Kabam Crash was saying, look, it's really not. When you look at the numbers, it's not. It doesn't have the same level of engagement that some of our other game modes do. So, with this surge in interest in Battlegrounds, is it now at or beyond the level of some of the other game modes in MCOC? And obviously, I don't have access to the specificity of the numbers that I would need to ultimately answer that question. But based on what I've seen, right? So 112K people got into Gladiator Circuit this season, which means that you're getting Radiance, right? Kabam has deemed the people who get into Gladiator Circuit people who are, to be cheeky about it, worthy of getting Radiance, right? So compare that to the other two game modes that either are now or will shortly be issuing Radiance, which is Alliance War, Alliance Quest, right? Given the way that they've set up the rewards distribution brackets, it's up to as many as 150,000 people will be getting rewards from AW, and up to 105,000 people will be getting rewards from AQ. Now, I've chosen this measure of who has Kabam decided is worthy of getting Radiance. Again, I'm being a little bit glib. Don't read too much into that. But that's, at least from my perspective, a useful way of saying that's the level that Kabam has decided you are usefully engaging this game mode enough to be to warrant, I guess, getting the new premier currency. I have less than less than 150K, less than 105K. These are the absolute caps on the number of people who could be getting Radiance from those two game modes, because the reality is, as you work down the ranks for Alliance War, gold, the gold tiers, and then in Alliance Quest, they don't have names, but when you get into that top 2,500, top 3,500, I'm not saying, this is not to disparage any alliance that's really pushing hard in those game modes, and that's where you're ending up. But it's just the reality is there are a lot of alliances that are populated with top-end players who are playing at a very relaxed level and still able to get into gold tiers of AW or top 2,500, top 3,500 of AQ, right? So these are groups that either aren't doing all three battle groups mandatory participation in those game modes, or I guess they are not really pushing in those game modes. So for Alliance War, that might mean, yes, we're setting up at least a defense in all three battle groups, but nobody's planning. Maybe even participation is just optional. So we're still winning some wars because of just the strength of our defense, right? Or in AQ, we're not doing all three battle groups, or in the battle groups that are doing AQ, it's maybe just boss rush, or again, it's just optional. So I can't really hazard a guess on how much lower the true number is than 150K or 105K, but let's at least say that it's probably a good way short of those numbers. So by those measures, we've had a lot more competitive, or people playing Battlegrounds competitively, than we have by this one measure, people playing AW or AQ at a competitive enough level for Kabam to decide to give you Radiance, right? Now, said it before in this video, I'm going to say it again. There was this problem at the start of the season. Kabam messed up the seeding, so it was much easier to reach Gladiator Circuit than it would be in a normal season. Much easier, at least, to reach it quickly. I don't know if the number ultimately of people reaching Gladiator Circuit would have been that much different. But that would just be entire guesswork, right? So I can't really say much based just on that. What I can say is, looking at the data that I have access to, of those 112,000 people, roughly 109,000 people played at least one Gladiator Circuit match. Now, that's not necessarily meaningfully engaging, but at least, you know, it's only 3,000 people who decided I'm just going to play that one match to qualify rewards, and then I'm out, right? So, how much more than one match did they play? I have no way of authoritatively determining that. But let's look at some other measures, right? So, who at least got there early? 96,000 people got there, at least in the first 3 weeks of the season. Again, it was easy to reach. Just because people didn't wait for the last minute doesn't mean that they were meaningfully engaging in the game mode. So we can look at, well, how many points did you manage to accrue? 50,000 plus people finished with 64 points or more, right? Which means that you got at least 4 wins. I think this starts to become a better measure of how many people are meaningfully engaging. It's still a little bit potentially, you know, too fair or unfair, right? That there might be some people who are very strong or have very strong rosters that were able to, you know, dash off 4, 5, 6 quick wins and then just decided that's enough for me, I'm out, right? And so you couldn't say that those people are meaningfully engaging. But on the other hand, you know, who knows how many people were really pushing hard in Battlegrounds, but they don't have the skill of the roster yet to get into Gladiator Circuit or to get to, you know, 4 wins above 0, the 64-point marker. So, you know, looking at some other measures, if you want to raise the bar even a little bit higher to say 100 points, it's still 34,000 people. That's quite a few people. Using 200 here just because that was the final Radiance goal. 11,000 people. Now, I don't know if they necessarily, all those 11,000 people got to 200 points in time, but, you know, 11,000 people to get to 200 points. There were seasons where 200 points was enough to get you Quantum, so that's an amazing number. But the way I am ultimately decided that, you know, given the data that I have, what's the best I can do to try and say how many people were actively engaging? And what I ended up saying was, okay, 2 different measures. One, people who got to 100 points or more. Again, yes, some people might have very quickly gotten to 100 and then dipped, but let's use that as one measure. So either that or the first match you played in Gladiator Circuit was within the first week, and you also had your final match in Gladiator Circuit was within the last 3 or 4 days of the season. So I can't say for sure that just because your first match was early and your last match was late, that you were consistently playing all throughout the season. But I feel like, okay, well, probably of that population, quite a large percentage were playing continuously, at least at some level, right? And so the people who were doing one of those 2 things, you have almost 50,000 people. So time will tell. You know, obviously there's some initial surge of interest. It's likely going to die down a little bit. Also, the seeding change that they made this season, likely, I assume we would have heard if they decided to keep it in place, right? They're probably not going to keep it in place. So, so what degree, that'll have some impact. But if we can get, you know, 40,000 plus people playing Battlegrounds competitively going forward, you know, I think you really can't call Battlegrounds an each game mode anymore. I think that's going to warrant further investment in Battlegrounds on a continuing basis from this point out, if we can maintain that level of interest. So hopefully everybody who, or at least a big portion of the people who pushed in Battlegrounds this season, found it worthwhile, engaging, rewarding, and will continue to do so, because I do like this game mode, even though I complain about it a lot. I do want to see that it remains viable and that Kabam continues to invest into it. All right, so I'll wrap it up there. Thanks for everybody who watched this video. If you liked it, please share it with your alliance mates, with your friends, whoever, usual spiel, right? If you're not previously subscribed, please do subscribe. Close to, I've gotten a fair number of subscribers in the past few weeks. I'm pretty close to 200. So if you can get me over that hump, I'd love to get there by the end of June. So, yeah, take care. Have a good day. See you in the next video.